Just recently I completed the deal to purchase an abandoned settlement with a farm, and now we have to set off on the road in our pickup truck to inspect our purchase. It is located in quite picturesque places, as you can see. By the way, here is the settlement itself, and as I was told, it is abandoned. But we will not stop here, because we are more interested in the farm itself. It, in turn, is also heavily overgrown with bushes, and almost nothing is visible, but the silhouettes of buildings have still remained here. I wonder what we will be able to find here, because we spent all our money on this purchase, and now we simply do not have any. The territory of this farm is quite extensive, so I am sure that we will find something valuable here. Without thinking for long, I began the inspection from the entrance. The fence here collapsed a long time ago. It will need to be replaced, and next to it there is an old wooden shed under which the first find was waiting for me. Whether it is a cultivator or a harrow is not yet clear, but I can say for sure that this equipment is old and was used for working in the field. The next thing I found was an old bicycle. Judging by its appearance, it is even in working condition. At the same time, I am sure that the most interesting thing awaits inside. Opening the door, I confirmed my intuition. There is something here that looks like a tractor, but its visual condition speaks for itself. Perhaps this vehicle is even homemade. I tried to start the engine, but I was not able to do it because there's simply no fuel, so I cannot say for sure whether this tractor is operational or not. But in the future, we will definitely check it. Besides it, under the shed, there was also an old mower. Excellent, it may soon be useful to us, but again, we will need to check its functionality. Moving further, I came across a rusty water pumping station. I am not sure that it functions properly, but perhaps it will be possible to sell it for scrap metal. As for the central building, it turned out to be a barn in which animals used to live. The interior setting also indicates this. There are even remnants of straw left here, as well as other consumables. Having found nothing particularly interesting, I continued walking further until I reached an abandoned gas station. Looking at it visually, I can also say that it is unlikely to function, but it will go for dismantling for spare materials. The next thing I found was a shed under which there was a cedar. Its condition was much better than the previous finds. Therefore, perhaps with its help, we will work in the field. By the way, I almost forgot to say, we also have one. At the same time, we will look at the field a little later, and for now, we will continue the inspection. On the other side of the large barn, there was a covering under which a wagon was standing. Although it is old, I think it will still be able to perform its functions, so it will also be useful to us, especially since we will have to clear this entire plot of bushes and take them somewhere. But that will be later, and for now, I headed to another collapsed shed. Its condition, as you can see, is the most critical of all that we have found. Although besides the shed, I also found something valuable. Old bales of straw. But not only they were here, there were also some strange bags. As it later turned out, there are seeds inside them. There was nothing more interesting here, so I continued on my way, and soon I found such a shed. This building looks more like a small workshop. I became interested in what was inside, but as it turned out, there was nothing valuable there. In the middle of the building, even a large bush had grown, and nearby there were only a few scattered tools. Then I walked a little more around the territory until I found this old combine harvester. It looks quite well preserved, but it is interesting to see whether its engine works. As it turned out, it was in order, because it started with half a turn, and after I drove it a little, I made sure that this machinery is quite serviceable. Excellent. At this point, we had inspected all the nearest buildings. The finds were quite worthy, although unfortunately nothing very expensive was found. At the same time, our exploration does not end here, so we get into the car and head to the settlement itself. As I said a little earlier, here you can see a field that also came to us, but no one has worked on it for a long time, and the crop has simply dried up. But I think this will not prevent us from plowing the field and planting it. And here is the settlement itself. It is also not in very good condition condition since it was abandoned a long time ago. Only a few buildings and fallen poles and trees remain. At the same time, I think that we can easily restore this settlement. By the way, something interesting may have remained in it, so I decided to inspect it. At first I found nothing. There were only empty buildings, although they were closed. I also found a house in quite good condition. I think it will be possible to spend the night in it. And when I had already despaired of finding any discoveries, I found some scrap metal. It seems that once these were parts of a front loader for a tractor, but now they do not function. So we will be able to sell them for scrap. That is exactly what I decided to do, so I carried them to our pickup. After that, I secured the fines with straps so that they would not fall out on the road. We will sell this scrap metal in order to buy fuel, since we need to check the tractor's operability. So I went to the nearest town where I was able to sell the found items. By the way, we received almost 1,000 euros for them, which is already not bad for a starting budget. And of course, as I said, I purchased a canister of diesel fuel. After that, I headed with it to our territory. Here we are on the spot, so let's check the tractor for operability. I poured some fuel into it. I tried to start the engine, but at first it would not start. Although soon it still showed signs of life, and the tractor turned out to be operational. After driving around the territory a little, I made sure of its capabilities. It is just great that it works, since we will really need a tractor. By the way, before starting the restoration of this farm, I would like to show you something else. As it turned out, this is not all the buildings that are on this territory. Not far from here, there is also such an abandoned hangar in the mountain. It is quite curious why it is here and what is hidden inside. Therefore, without delay, I tried to open the door. It gave way, and I saw that it is some kind of warehouse, inside of which there is quite a large number of bales of straw. There is also other junk, but it is strange why this hangar is located so far away and as if hidden. I never found the answer to this question, so I decided to leave the hangar for later and for now take up restoration. The primary task, I think, will be clearing the territory, since everything here is overgrown with grass and bushes. The found mower will help us with this if it is working. Yes, we need to check that. I drove up with the tractor and hitched it. After that, I started the rusty mechanism, which gave in and began to work. Thus, the mower is indeed quite operational. Well, let's check how well it copes. I began mowing the tall grass as well as large bushes. As for the mower's working capabilities, although it works, it is quite slow. This is bad since the territory here is very large, so we will have to spend quite a lot of time on this. An even bigger disadvantage was that it is very inconvenient to mow, since everywhere there are large bushes and trees that the mower cannot handle. But even despite this, the work still needs to be done, so I continued mowing where it was reasonable and possible. In the end, during the process, another problem appeared. The tractor ran out of fuel again, although by that moment I had already mowed most of the bushes and grass. So now we will at least be able to move normally around the territory we purchased. At this point, I decided to leave the tractor and take up clearing manually, so I took the axe that I had brought with me and began chopping large bushes. At the same time, I removed the branches from them since I planned to take these trunks for sale. Small trees also came across my way, and I was able to cut them down with the axe as well. As for the large trees, I did not touch them since it is inconvenient to cut them with an axe. As you understand, there were a lot of bushes and trees on the territory. Therefore, I had to spend quite a lot of time dealing with all this, especially considering that each log had to be processed after it had been cut down. At the same time, it was not convenient to work everywhere, since trees had grown through some buildings. In the end, only after several hours did I manage to finish cutting down the small trees and bushes. As I said earlier, I was not going to just leave them here, and we would rather sell them, earning some money. Therefore, I began began carefully stacking the logs into the bed of our pickup truck. I think this amount will be enough so that the logs do not fall out. So we get into the car and set off. We are now heading to the local town to the sawmill. Upon arrival, I sold the first batch of logs and earned almost 2,500 euros. As for me, this is an excellent result for unnecessary wood. I decided not to return empty-handed, so I stopped by the store where I purchased diesel fuel, which, as you remember, we had run out of. After unloading the fuel under the shed, I decided to continue selling the wood, since there was still a lot left on the farm territory. Therefore, having loaded another batch of wood, I went to the sawmill, and selling wood became my job for the next period of time. And so our balance increased by 16,000 euros. By that time, I had sold all the cut wood, but as you know, we still have large trees left, so I went to the store where I purchased a chainsaw that will help deal with them. Only after that was I able to return to our territory to continue working, but for now, let's forget about the trees, since after cutting the bushes, there is still interfering grass left. I decided to remove it with the help of the manual mower that I found on the territory of this farm. So we grab the mower and begin mowing. I think it will be easier to go through the places where it was completely inconvenient to drive with the tractor, since the mower is small and differs in its maneuverability, unlike the massive tractor. So I conveniently and easily coped with mowing the grass in hard to reach areas. By the way, I think that the mown grass will not go to waste since it can be used as feed for our animals. That is why, without thinking for long, I built a silage pit to put all the grass there. Well, now it remains to collect it and send it to the silage pit. For this, I took a shovel in my hands, which I found on the territory of the plot, and shovel by shovel dumped the mown grass there. I coped with this process. In the end, 12,000 liters of grass ended up in the silage pit. Excellent. It will not be unnecessary and will become a good supply of food for future animals. As a result, this is what we managed to do in just one day. The plot has become much more well kept, but is still far from its ideal, and we will continue its restoration tomorrow since evening was approaching and I decided to rest. We will do this in the settlement, in the house I told you about. The beautiful morning of the next day arrived and I was ready to work. Right now, we run to the farm because there's still a lot of work waiting for us to restore it. Today, the first job I decided to do will be cutting down dry trees. So I took the chainsaw in my hands and began doing this. At the same time, I am thinking about what to do with this wood. Perhaps we will sell it, or perhaps we will make something more valuable from it. Fortunately, there were not so many dry trees, so I did not have to fuss for long, and thus, in just a few hours, I finished cutting them down. All that remained was to carefully cut the trees that had grown through the old shed. For this, I climbed onto the roof and gradually cut them down. Fortunately, I managed to do this without problems and did not damage the already ruined barn. By the way, I did decide that we will not simply sell the wood, so I built such a furnace in which we will be able to create charcoal from the wood for heating the settlement. Now it only remains to cut the wood into pieces and put it there, which is exactly what I started doing, carrying log after log. And when it was again filled with wood, I set it on fire, and the process of creating charcoal began. Of course, it will not be very fast, so we can leave this production alone for now. But you will ask, what will we do with the remaining wood? Everything is simple. I would like to make building materials from it so that we can repair our plot, but unfortunately, we do not yet have money for a special machine. Therefore, I decided to sell the bales that we found under the shed. To do this, I drove up our pickup and began loading the straw into it. I hope that the money from its sale will be enough for us to accomplish what we planned. But now we will check this. So we fasten the straps and set off. As usual, we will handle the sales in the local town, and there a farmer buys the straw. For the found bales, he paid us almost 9,000 euros. Wonderful. This is exactly the money that we needed. So we returned to our plot and, without thinking for long, build the necessary sawmill machine for only 10,000 euros. Here we will be able to produce various types of building materials needed for restoring the farm. But before starting its operation, of course, we first need to bring wood. So sawing the trees into smaller pieces, I began carrying them directly to the machine. Literally all the wood that was on our plot fit here. And that is a whole 35,000 liters. Excellent. Now we launch the process of creating building materials. At this point, the work with the wood is finished for now, and we can move on to other work. For this, in turn, we will need a tractor, in which, as you remember, the fuel had run out. So I had to fill a canister and refuel the tractor. Only after that was it able to start, and I returned the mower under the shed. And instead of it, I hitched the cultivator, which we will need now. I think it is not hard to guess where we are heading. We have work waiting for us in the field, because this crop, which dried up a long time ago, first of all needs to be removed before sowing the field, since we will need harvest if we are going to get animals. So we lower the cultivator and begin the cultivation process. As I said, the tractor's operability is quite good. I was a little worried that this homemade tractor would find it difficult to cultivate uphill, but although not quickly, it coped with its task. And when driving downhill, the working speed even reached 15 kilometers per hour, and this in turn made it possible without any problems and in a short time to cope with the cultivation. Having finished the work, now it remained to wait until the soil rests, because some time is needed before planting some kind of crop. Therefore, we will deal with this already next month, and for now, we return to our farm, where I in particular decided to work a little, because there is a need to remove these stumps, which will also interfere with us. The chainsaw coped with this quite well. It quickly and efficiently removed the stumps, leaving behind only a little sawdust. So after I finished, I decided to go and rest. On the morning of the next month, I got into our truck and headed to the farm, where I switched to the tractor, to which I hitched the seeder. Right now, we need it, because it is necessary to sow the field. But since it is empty, first it was necessary to fill it with seeds. Therefore, I went to the collapsed shed and from there poured several bags of seeds. Only after that could I go to the field to work. But before doing this, it is necessary to decide what we will sow. Since it was summer outside, we would not be able to sow many things. So I decided to sow this field with poppy. For this, I selected the necessary seeds and began sowing. Even despite its small size, the seeder worked exceptionally well. I did not see any missed spots appear or the working speed drop, so I am glad that we found this equipment on the farm. During the work, a small problem appeared. It consisted in the fact that the seeds ran out. Therefore, I had to return to the plot and replenish them. Only after that was I able to complete the sowing process of this field. Speaking of poppy, it grows in just a few months. So we can leave the field for this period and return when there is a harvest. Therefore, we returned to the farm. Next, I decided to move on to work in the settlement itself. It, as you remember, is also overgrown and needs to be cleared. So taking the chainsaw in my hands, I began to do this, and I also decided to take the wood to our sawmill machine. Excellent, I like this result much more. After clearing, the settlement looks much more well kept. All that remains is to restore the damaged buildings and we will be able to live here perfectly. It is only a pity that we do not have enough budget to do this, especially since we will also need to restore the farm itself. So I decided to sell some unnecessary materials from the hidden warehouse. Therefore, I went there again to carefully inspect the Pomashini in order to find something valuable. Inside there was even an old carriage. I wonder how long it has stood there. But the most interesting thing was not even that, because I found some kind of control panel and pressed a button. As a result, the straw bales began to move and a hidden door opened. Wow, Could this really be a secret passage? I became interested in what might be hidden below, so I went down in the elevator, and I can't believe it. Why, this is a tank. It is unclear what it is doing here. To take a better look at it, I cut down a bush. After that, I was really able to make sure that it was a tank. No matter what you say, I definitely did not expect to see such a find here. Of course, I became interested and began inspecting this tank. Visually, its condition was a little bad, but that is because of its age, since it seems quite old. As for the technical part, it still needs to be started and tried out. Of course, not on the first attempt, but still the engine started. And this is wonderful news, since it may indicate that we can become rich if we manage to sell this tank. All its mechanisms basically function, which means we can still try to sell it. But as you understand, it will not be possible to do this so easily, so I decided to go to my old acquaintance so that he could help us with this. The road to him is not close, so we will have to use our transport. Therefore, we get into our SUV and set off. While we are driving, if my memory does not fail me, such tanks on the black market can cost around 500,000 euros. Well, of course, we will still need to find a buyer, although my old friend should handle this. Speaking of him, here we have arrived at the old man's shack. After talking with him, I told him what I needed and he agreed to help for a small percentage. But this will of course not be very fast, so for now we can return to the farm, because there is still a lot of work there. By the way, about it, I decided to start clearing the path to the secret bunker. In the future it may help me, and besides, we will somehow need to pull the tank out from below. Therefore, using the chainsaw, I first removed the small bushes and then began sawing the interfering trees. By the way, I also removed the stumps with the chainsaw since they will interfere with passage. And I plan to send the obtained trunks to our building materials production. Therefore, first we process them from unnecessary branches, and we also cut them into smaller parts since I am going to transport them. This tree in front of the entrance will also interfere, so we will cut it down. Excellent. Now we will need our truck, so we drive it up to the wood and begin loading it into the bed. The first trailer filled up quite quickly, so I fastened the straps and took these logs directly to our production. The wood will fit perfectly there. Of course, it was not possible to remove everything in one trip, so I had to return again. Only after that, when I filled another trailer, was all the wood removed. As usual, I transported it to our sawmill machine and unloaded everything there. During the operation of our production, I noticed that the storage was already full and needed to be freed, so I unloaded some building materials since I decided to move them under the shed. This is done so that the building materials do not get wet in the rain and serve us as excellent construction material. I had to fuss a little, but I still managed, and now there is no need to worry about their safety. I will note that while working with building materials, I began thinking about construction. The old fence has already outlived its usefulness, so of course it needs to be replaced. And this is what I am going to do. For this, we switched to construction mode and demolished the remains of the old fence. Only after that did I begin installing a new quality fence. Of course, it will be made of wood, since that is the building material we have for now. After some time, the new fence was ready. It looks much better than the previous one. Now no one will be able to simply enter our territory. As for work, that is all for today. Therefore, I went to the house to rest. Several months flew by unnoticed, and after some time, our field was already ready to harvest. Therefore, with the arrival of the morning of October, I decided that our first task for today would be harvesting the field. After looking at the poppy field, I made sure that the poppy had reached the harvest stage. By the way, it turned out that the sowing did not go without problems, since a missed spot was discovered in the field. In the future, we need to try to avoid such problems. Well, at this moment, to process the field, we will need a combine harvester, and fortunately, we have one on the farm. So we head for the machine and drive straight there. And here, in fact, is that very combine. Although it is old, I think it will cope with the poppy. So without delay, we head to the field with it. There, I turned the combine around and started the header, after which I began harvesting the poppy. To be honest, I am harvesting it for the first time and cannot even imagine how much money it will bring us. But I hope we will at least get some profit. First pass showed that the amount of poppy would be small this time. Although this is not surprising, since this plant is not very high yielding, so I think such a result is quite acceptable. Let us hope that the price per 1,000 liters of this poppy poppy will also please us. As for the work itself, in principle, the combine coped quite well. Although uphill, it was very difficult for it, and I constantly had to change gears so that the combine would not stop. But even so, although slowly, I am sure that we will cope with this field without problems. In principle, that is how it was. And when we had harvested almost half of it, the bunker of our mini combine was already full, and now it had to be unloaded somewhere. For this, we have something on the farm, so we head for it. First of all, we get into the tractor and drive to the barn where the trailer we need is located. This is the wagon that we found, and I think it will be quite suitable for the poppy, especially since the harvest promises to be not very large, so I think everything will be fine. Having reached the field itself, I carefully positioned the tractor, after which I unfolded the auger on the combine and poured the entire bunker directly into the trailer. Only after that was I able to continue harvesting our field. As I said a little earlier, about half remained, maybe a little less, so a few more hours will have to be spent on this work. Unfortunately, the combine's bunker was not enough to harvest the entire field, so I had to fill the trailer and it was overfilled. In that case, now we will first have to sell the harvested poppy since there is nowhere to unload it for now. To solve this problem, I got into the tractor and headed to the selling point in the local town. Upon arrival, I coped with the task and the full trailer brought us a little more than 5,000 euros. This is quite a good result. I expected it to be a little less. At the same time, the field is not yet completely harvested, so it is time to return to the field. Having arrived at the place, I unloaded the remainder from the combine, and only after that was I able to complete the harvesting of the entire field. Thanks to this, we got another incomplete trailer of poppy, and now it also needs to be sold in order to earn money. After selling the leftovers, our balance exceeded 10,000 euros. This is not a very big result, but at least with this money, we will be able to restore some buildings. By the way, while I was returning, the old man who was supposed to sell the found tank contacted me, so I will need to go to him. But before doing this, I put the machinery back in its places. After that, I headed to the secret bunker since it was necessary to transport the tank directly to the old man. It was good that it freely fit into the lift, so I was able to go up together with it, and under its own power, I headed straight through the forest to the old man's hut. According to him, buyers are waiting for us there. By the way, this is really the first time I am driving such a tank, but controlling it is quite not difficult. To be honest, I even had a little fun and managed to shoot at a tree. In the end, getting to the old man was not a problem, and here we are already on the spot. By the way, these are exactly the buyers I was talking about. Together with them, we discussed the amount of the deal, and in the end, came to an agreement. Taking into account the old man's commission, this tank was sold for 473,000 euros. This is an excellent amount that will help our abandoned farm rise from the dead again. By the way, that is exactly what I am going to do, but a little later. For now, since we have money, this season we will be able to plant the field again, and for this, I decided to purchase new equipment instead of the old one. So I got on the old bicycle and set off. It looks a little comical when you ride such an old bicycle to buy yourself a new good tractor, but there is nothing bad about it, and I calmly got to the store. There I sold the old bicycle since we no longer need it, and went to look at tractors. In my opinion, such a Volvo tractor will suit us perfectly, especially since its price is not very high, only 50,000 euros. I also purchased a new cultivator for it. After that, together with the new equipment, I went to the field where without delay I began working, since it was already evening and it was necessary to hurry in order to sow the field this month. Speaking of the new tractor and the cultivator, they worked simply thanks to this, after just a few hours, I was able to cultivate the field. However, by the time I finished, it had already started to get dark, and I had to work in the light of the headlights. Well, let's not delay since we are in a hurry. I returned to our farm and placed the cultivator under the shed, and I myself went again to the store to purchase new equipment. As you understand, now we need a seeder. From the presented options, I chose such a multifunctional seeder. It can be filled not only with seeds, but also with fertilizer, which is very good. Naturally, I purchased all these consumables, and only after that did I head to the field to work. Upon arrival, I saw that it was very dark, therefore I decided to use rented floodlights. As you can see, I placed them around the perimeter of the field so that it would be more convenient to work, and when I started working, I was upset because the consumption of the seeder turned out to be simply colossal, so I had to urgently replace this seeder with another one. Only after that was I able to begin sowing the field. As I planned, now we will sow barley, since it will be useful for our animals in the future. In general, despite the darkness in the field, I managed to cope, and it was sown, although of course not without problems. Finishing the working day, I returned the floodlights from rental, and also placed the machinery under the shed. Only after that was I able to go and rest. In the morning of the next day, I decided to take care of arranging our farm. Therefore, in construction mode, I began demolishing unnecessary buildings, and in their place built new ones. Thus, the farm gradually began transforming from abandoned into functional. Some buildings, of course, I left, and some were replaced so that it would be convenient to work on the farm. I also created roads along which we can now move without problems. Excellent. I think we can finish with construction for now, and we will deal with finally getting animals. For this, together with the tractor, I went to the store and purchased a transport trailer for animals there, and with it I went to the animal dealer. It turned out that this is one of the collectible items that are scattered around this map. For them, they pay 10,000 euros each, so I think we will need to look for them, but that will be later. And for now, at the animal dealer, I purchased goats. It is them that I am going to breed. Therefore, I began transporting the animals to our pen. In turn, I filled it by purchasing as many as 250 goats. Excellent, we coped with this, and now we have animals on the farm. Since they have food for now, we will leave them alone. But for now, I became interested in searching for collectible items, so I went searching. On my way, I found quite a few rare and interesting finds, and in the end, I was still able to find all 25 collectible items. As a result, our balance exceeded a whole 400,000 euros. Joyful, I went to rest until spring. Waking up in the morning, I was satisfied because our farm continued its development. In the field, we have crops growing, the farm itself is developing, and we also have good production and animals. No less significant is our good budget, thanks to which we can continue to exist. And we achieved all this literally from scratch in just 1 year, so I am sure that we coped with this survival, and with that, the video comes to an end. If you like this video, subscribe to the channel and leave likes. Thank you all for watching.